The Neverland Tapes, what Michael recorded but never released. Somewhere in a vault in Los Angeles, there are over 150 unreleased Michael Jackson recordings that the world has never heard. Not demos, not outtakes. Complete, fully produced tracks that Michael specifically chose to lock away. For decades, fans have wondered what's on those tapes. But here's what most people don't know. Michael didn't just record music at Neverland. He recorded conversations, thoughts, creative processes, and personal reflections that reveal a side of him the public never saw. And there was one particular tape that his inner circle tried desperately to keep hidden. A tape that would change everything people thought they knew about the King of Pop. This is the story of what Michael Jackson recorded but never released, and exactly why those tapes matter more than any album he ever put out. Let me paint the picture for you. In 1988, Michael Jackson purchased a 2,700-acre property in Los Olivos, California for $19.5 million. He renamed it Neverland Ranch. But Neverland wasn't just a home. It was a creative fortress. Michael built a private recording studio on the property, a state-of-the-art facility that rivaled any professional studio in Los Angeles or New York. He called it the Neverland Valley Recording Studio. Most people think Michael only recorded there occasionally, between official studio sessions. That's completely wrong. Michael recorded at Neverland constantly, day and night, sometimes for weeks without leaving the property. Here's where it gets interesting. Matt Forger, Michael's longtime engineer and collaborator, revealed something that changes everything. He said Michael would often record himself talking through ideas, singing melody lines, working through arrangements, sometimes for hours at a time. These weren't structured recording sessions. These were creative streams of consciousness. Michael would sit at the piano, start playing, and let the recorder run. No producers, no executives, no deadlines, just Michael and the music. The studio at Neverland was equipped with the best technology money could buy. A custom-built SSL console, vintage microphones that had been used on records by the Beatles and Stevie Wonder, digital and analog recording systems running simultaneously because Michael wanted options. He had a specific Neumann U47 microphone that he used for all his lead vocals. That same microphone captured his voice on Billie Jean, Thriller, and Bad. It was practically an extension of his voice. Engineers who worked there said the room had an energy unlike any other studio. Maybe it was the isolation of the ranch. Maybe it was the creative freedom. Or maybe it was just Michael's presence making every recording feel significant. Now here's the kicker. Michael was obsessed with preservation. He kept everything. Every vocal take, every instrumental variation, every spoken word between takes. Bruce Swedian, who engineered Thriller and Bad, said Michael treated the recording process like a painter treats sketches. He wanted every version documented because he believed the creative journey was as important as the final product. That means there are recordings of Michael explaining his thought process, debating lyric choices, discussing chord progressions, laughing at mistakes, talking to himself about what worked and what didn't. Think about what that means. The world knows the final version of Billie Jean. But somewhere in those archives is Michael explaining why he chose that bass line, why he structured the verses that way, what story he was really trying to tell. The public heard Beat It. But there's a tape of Michael working through the guitar solo arrangement with Eddie Van Halen, discussing exactly what emotion he wanted that solo to convey. These aren't just recordings. These are windows into Michael's mind. But that's not all. Michael's creative process went far beyond music. Bill Whitfield, one of Michael's longtime bodyguards, shared something that most people don't know. He said Michael would often walk around Neverland with a small tape recorder, speaking ideas into it. Poetry, short stories, film concepts, philosophical thoughts. Michael didn't just think about music. He thought about art, storytelling, the human condition, and he recorded all of it. This is where it gets deeply personal. Michael's relationship with recording technology was unique. He grew up in studios. From the age of 5, he was surrounded by microphones, tape machines, recording equipment. The studio wasn't just a workplace for Michael. It was a safe space, a place where he had complete control, a place where he could be vulnerable without judgment. Brad Sundberg, who worked as Michael's technical director for years, said something that really stuck. He said Michael felt more comfortable expressing himself through a microphone than in face-to-face conversation. That recorder was his confidant. Here's exactly how that matters. When the allegations hit in 1993, Michael went through one of the darkest periods of his life. He canceled the Dangerous tour. He went into seclusion. The world saw him crumbling publicly. But here's what nobody knew. During that time, Michael was recording, not music, himself, his thoughts, his pain, his confusion, his anger. Frank Cassio, a close friend who was at Neverland during that period, later mentioned that Michael would spend hours alone in the studio, just talking into microphones, processing, trying to make sense of what was happening to him. Those tapes exist, they've never been released, but people who've heard them say they're devastating, not because they're confessional in a tabloid sense, but because they're raw, unfiltered. The real Michael, without the public persona, without the carefully crafted image, without the PR strategy. Just a man trying to understand why the world turned on him. But wait, if these tapes are so powerful, why haven't they been released? Here's the truth. After Michael's death in 2009, his estate went through the archives. They found hundreds of hours of unreleased material, music, spoken word, personal recordings. The estate had a decision to make: release everything and let the public decide what matters, or protect Michael's privacy and only release what he would have wanted public. They chose protection. John Branca and John McClane, the co-executors of Michael's estate, made it clear. They would only release material that met Michael's standards. If Michael chose not to release something during his lifetime, there was probably a reason. The estate's job wasn't to exploit every scrap of content. It was to honor Michael's artistic vision and personal boundaries. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated. Some of those unreleased recordings aren't just personal reflections. They're unfinished collaborations with other artists. There are tapes of Michael working with Prince, recorded during a brief period in the late 80s when they considered collaborating. The two met at Prince's home studio in Minnesota. They laid down backing tracks for at least 3 songs, but the collaboration fell apart. Creative differences, ego clashes, 2 kings in one room. The tapes from those sessions capture something extraordinary. Not just the music, but the tension, the competition, the mutual respect mixed with rivalry. You can hear them pushing each other, challenging each other's ideas, trying to outdo one another even in collaboration. Then there are the Freddie Mercury sessions from 1983. Michael and Freddie recorded together in Los Angeles, working on 3 tracks: There Must Be More to Life Than This, State of Shock, and Victory. Some of these eventually surfaced in different forms. State of Shock was reworked with Mick Jagger. There Must Be More to Life Than This appeared on a posthumous Freddie Mercury album. But the original sessions, the versions with both Michael and Freddie's vocals fully realized, those remain mostly unreleased. People who've heard them say the vocal interplay between Michael's precision and Freddie's raw power is unlike anything either artist released publicly. And here's something that will shock you. There are recordings with Whitney Houston, not the duet fans always wanted, but studio sessions where they were experimenting with harmonies, trading vocal runs, working through arrangements for a song that was supposed to appear on Whitney's album. The project never finished. Scheduling conflicts, label politics, industry complications. But those tapes exist somewhere in the Neverland vault, capturing 2 of the greatest voices in music history, creating something the world was never meant to hear. These aren't just historical curiosities. These are pieces of musical history that could reshape how people understand the relationships between the greatest artists of that era. But releasing them requires permissions, legal clearances, and respect for everyone involved. Michael's estate can't just dump everything into the market. Each tape has its own story, its own context, its own complications. Let me break down exactly what's known to exist in those Neverland archives. There are at least 40 unreleased songs recorded during the Bad era. Michael wrote and recorded over 60 songs for that album. Only 11 made the final cut. The rest are sitting in the vault. Some are finished, some are half complete. All of them represent Michael's creative process during one of the most productive periods of his career. There are over 30 songs from the Dangerous sessions. Michael recorded constantly between 1989 and 1991. Teddy Riley, who produced much of that album, said they had enough material for 3 albums. Michael only released 1. The rest stayed at Neverland. There are recordings from the Invincible era, some of which took years to produce. Michael was a perfectionist. He would record a vocal line 50 times, trying to get the exact emotional tone he wanted. All 50 takes still exist. Engineers kept everything because Michael sometimes changed his mind and wanted to revisit earlier versions. And then there are the completely unknown projects. Albums that were planned but never announced. Collaborative projects that were discussed but never finalized. Experimental tracks where Michael tried different genres, different sounds, different approaches that didn't fit the commercial expectations of what a Michael Jackson album should be. But here's what makes the Neverland Tapes truly irreplaceable. It's not just the music, it's the context. Michael would often record voice memos before or after recording sessions, explaining what he was trying to achieve, what inspired a particular song, what emotion he was trying to capture, what message he wanted to convey. Those voice memos are still there, attached to the music files, creating a complete picture of Michael's artistic intent. Imagine hearing Stranger in Moscow and then hearing Michael explain exactly what he was feeling when he wrote it, what images were in his mind, what he wanted listeners to feel. Imagine hearing Earth Song and then hearing Michael's spoken reflection on environmental destruction, human cruelty, and the responsibility of artists to speak truth. That's what exists in those archives, not just songs, stories. Here's exactly how to think about it. The released Michael Jackson catalog is the final product. The Neverland Tapes are the blueprint. One shows what Michael wanted the world to see. The other shows how he got there. Both matter, but only one reveals the real creative genius behind the king of pop. After Michael's death, there was enormous pressure on the estate to release everything. Fans wanted more music. Record labels wanted more product. Everyone had an opinion about what should be made public, but the estate held firm. They released Michael, an album of previously unreleased tracks, in 2010. They released Escape in 2014. Both albums were carefully curated, with input from people who knew Michael's standards. Both were met with mixed reactions because fans debated whether Michael would have approved. That's the impossible position the estate is in. Release too much, and they're exploiting Michael's legacy. Release too little, and they're denying fans access to music Michael created. There's no right answer. Only difficult choices. So, remember those tapes I mentioned at the beginning? The ones Michael recorded during the 1993 allegations, the personal reflections, the raw, unfiltered pain, those will probably never be released. Not because they're scandalous, but because they're private. Because Michael deserves the dignity of keeping some things to himself. Because not everything needs to be consumed by the public. The Neverland Tapes represent something bigger than unreleased music. They represent the gap between the public figure and the private person, between the icon and the human, between what we think we know about Michael Jackson and who he actually was. Those tapes exist as a reminder that even the most famous person in the world deserves spaces that remain untouched by public scrutiny. Michael Jackson recorded thousands of hours of material at Neverland. Some of it will eventually be released. Some of it will remain locked away forever. And maybe that's exactly how it should be, because the real legacy of those tapes isn't what's on them. It's what they represent, a creative mind that never stopped working, an artist who documented everything because he believed in the value of the process, not just the product, a human being who needed a private space to think, to create, to exist without the weight of the world watching. The Neverland Tapes aren't just unreleased music. They're proof that Michael Jackson was more than the moonwalk, more than the hits, more than the controversies. He was an artist in the truest sense. Someone who created because he had to. Someone who recorded because the act of capturing sound was how he made sense of the world. Someone who left behind a legacy that goes far deeper than what made it to radio. So there you have it. The real story of what Michael Jackson recorded but never released. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.